Welcome to the Film Florida podcast. I'm John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Before we get to our interview, if you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. Please also consider going to our website and donating $20.24 for our 2024 fundraising campaign. Visit the Film Florida merchandise page at filmflorida.creator-spring.com to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, and more. All merchandise proceeds go to the Film Florida Filmmaker Grant and Scholarship Fund. Aaron Gilman is the CEO of Steamroller Studios in Central Florida. Prior to his current role, Aaron worked in the animation and visual effects departments on such films as The Matrix Revolutions, The Avengers, Iron Man 3, the Hobbit franchise, and Avatar, among others. But arguably, Aaron's biggest passion is in providing leadership and creating the culture at Steamroller Studios that has allowed the independent animation studio to grow and flourish while providing exceptional service to clients and creating their own intellectual property in an area of the industry in constant flux and transition. We talk about all of this and more on this episode of the Film Florida podcast. Here's my conversation with Aaron Gilman from Steamroller Studios. Welcome to the Film Florida podcast, Aaron.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited to be here.
So let's kind of start at the beginning. What's your backstory? Where'd you come from?
Where did I come from? Let's see. I am a Canadian born in Montreal, not necessarily raised in Montreal. I moved around quite a lot throughout my childhood. But yeah, I'm a Montrealer that, spent a lot of time working in the animation industry outside of Canada. And yeah, I did I'm 51 years old now. I did my university degree in philosophy. Of all subjects. That is what you do when you have really no idea what you're supposed to do in life. And yeah, it was, I still talk about that today because that actually, in sort of reflection, was an incredible degree for me to do because the sort of, philosophical perspective, I think, not only on life, but what one does in their work and how they interact with other people and how they reflect on the decisions and actions that they take was something that I think that degree really helped me with. And so I still tell people today that, some of the principles of the degree are part of my day-to-day world, really, and always kind of have been. So I appreciate that education greatly. Then I got married very young. I met my wife at 22, married at 23, and we've been happily married now for 28 years. And as I started exploring career opportunities, I thought at first that I wanted to be on film sets. Always had a deep, deep love and passion for film and thought maybe working on sets was the right way to go. So I started trying to be a production assistant in order to qualify for guild membership with the Directors Guild of Canada. I absolutely hated being on film sets. It was like a form of torture for me, 18-hour days on your feet, just kind of standing there. Film sets are boring. They can be. There's a lot of, standing around and waiting. And that wasn't what I wanted to do. I preferred the idea of filmmaking through computers. And so I always had a deep love of computers. And from when I was a young age, I was heavily involved with computers. And yet I had this other side of me, which was very sort of visual arts oriented. And when I realized that animation was something that could combine my love of filmmaking and my passion for cinematography and for acting with computers, that just kind of clicked. After many, many years of working as a, photography assistant, I was a video store clerk back in the VHS days at Blockbuster and Rogers Video, and doing that for many years on minimum wage with a young wife. I put myself back into school, largely because I had a reconnecting with my brother and my sister, who I hadn't seen since I was 5 years old. We were sort of separated by a very difficult father. My father sort of raised them, and I was kind of, raised by my mom in a completely separate environment. environment. And so after many, many, many years, I was reconnected with both of them. And when I met them both, it was at a visual effects and animation company where they were working.
Oh.
My sister was at the time a production coordinator, and my brother was working in the studio. I don't know what his official title was. It would have been a production assistant or an office assistant or something like that. And when I met them, I saw all of these people animating dragons and modeling cool creatures, and I was like, oh my God, wait, what? What these things connect, this computer thing and my love of film. And so I ended up going back to school. And so I enrolled myself at the Vancouver Film School. And very quickly, I realized that I was absolutely in love with animation.
Mm.
And so that kind of film set environment that was so difficult for me, the computer kind of became that environment for me where I could control those things on my own with my own creativity. I could decide where the camera was going to be, and I could decide all of these kind of creative opportunities for narrative storytelling became fascinating for me. And so that's what started my career. And that was at about, I enrolled myself at 26, finished the program at 27, and had my first job at 27.
Well, and one of your earliest credited projects in character animation is your work on the Matrix Revolutions. What sticks out to you about that specific experience, and how did that kind of prepare you for what would be the rest of your career?
Yeah, I worked for a number of years at the very start of my career in Montreal. I was working on dinosaurs. So my first animated characters were T-Rexes and raptors and those sorts of things. And it was a great learning experience, but I felt that at that time, my upward momentum in animation at that time was quite fast. Within 2.5 years, I was a supervisor on these types of television projects, and I felt that that was way too fast. There was something wrong, right? Because how do
Hmm.
you go to being a supervisor in such a short period of time? And the reality was that while there was wonderful talent in Montreal at that time, I just felt that there was a lot more to learn. And I wasn't getting that from the environment that I was in. So I started looking for work outside of Canada, really. And I ended up getting hired at Tippett, which is a world-renowned and wonderful company, even still to this day. And I
Sure.
have friends that are still working there. And the first project that I got hired for, this was my first sort of foray into film animation, was The Matrix Revolutions, the third one. And so I moved with my wife, and she was pregnant at the time. So my son is actually born in San Francisco. And we moved to Tippett, where I stayed over a year and worked on three films: The Matrix Revolutions, Constantine, and Hellboy,
Mm.
the first one. The Matrix Revolutions was probably the first major slap in the face that I had as far as the complexities of working as an animator professionally, the difficulties of dealing with incredibly heavy rigs or new pipelines that I didn't understand because I had only ever worked in one company before. And I was surrounded by the best of the best. I was surrounded. I remember there was an animator. I'm sure I'm going to get his name right, actually. There was an animator who sat beside me named Chuck Duke. And Chuck, I just remember hearing that he was one of the stop motion animators on the California Raisin commercials. And I'm sitting beside this guy. I'm like, I grew up with the California Raisin commercials. They were amazing.
Uh-huh.
And so I was surrounded by just incredibly talented people. And I remember vividly the pain that I went through on Matrix Revolutions, where I was absolutely convinced at one point that I was going to get let go, that I was going to get fired, because it was like I was struggling so much to juggle not only the notes that I was getting, but the complexities of these sentinels, which were the robots with the 15 tentacles, right, that
Hmm.
everybody knows. And it was really, really hard work for a young guy coming into an industry that he's just learning in a city he's never lived in before, with a wife who's pregnant. And so it was a real challenge for me, but somehow something clicked, I guess you would say. I've talked in the past with people about this idea of how important mental weightlifting
Hmm.
is in animation. I think mental weightlifting is a concept that you would apply to anything. But what I mean about that for animation is, if you think about animation, it's this incredibly complex ball of intertwined technical complexities and creative complexities. And a shot in animation is just an untangling of those two things. How do I align the technical complexity of this shot with the performance that I need to achieve for a director to tell a narrative? And the thought process that we put into that in the moments where we're not actually doing the work is the mental weightlifting that I'm referring to.
Okay.
It's the untangling in your own brain of how you're going to approach the problem and how you're going to really achieve the highest quality in the shot by knowing what the blueprint of decisions and actions are that you're going to take in order to get there. And at some point, I think I just did that enough on the shot I was working on Matrix or what, the project in its entirety, but something clicked and I found my workflow. I found my way. And that was it. That was probably the hardest moment, I would say, I mean, I've had tough moments in my career,
Hmm.
obviously, but that was the most existential one. That was the one where it was like, what am I doing here? Am I going to get through this? And once that happened, I moved forward. And then, things were much easier for me after that point.
Well, and speaking of moving forward, in your future from there were films like The Avengers, Iron Man 3, the Hobbit franchise, as well as Avatar.
Mhm.
These are really well known for their experimentation and excellence in visual effects and animation. How did some of those earlier, struggles put you in a better position for these, and what did these projects teach you?
Oh, that's a great question and a big question. I would probably say, and we talk about this a lot in the animation industry, which is unless you're making your own film, you are ultimately a technician for someone else.
Right.
And so there's a resiliency that has to come into the psychology of anybody working for someone else. It's really as simple as that. I don't care what you're doing. If you're working for someone else, you need to have a resiliency. The
Hmm.
resiliency that I'm referring to is your ability to pivot and to do it with a smile on your face while still dedicating 150% of your energy towards that thing you're trying to achieve. And the more you kind of get directed and redirected, that resiliency gets tested. And some people will react in ways that are not conducive to a good, collaborative, healthy working environment.
Yep.
And that's not always their fault, the reaction is their fault, but it's understandable sometimes because working, especially I would say in visual effects, in a live action format is incredibly challenging. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people working in live action that don't necessarily understand the nuances of the CG or animation workflow. And so you can get kind of spun around quite a lot. And I would say probably the biggest thing that I had to learn was to distance my emotional relationship to the actual work that I was doing in the shot
Okay.
from the process of working collaboratively within a team. And so as time went by, and especially when I went to Weta Digital at the time, Weta Effects now, to work on some of the films that you mentioned, I think, moving into a phase where I was starting to disconnect the sort of ego portion of my involvement in the work that I was doing from what actually needs to be done in order to get the project completed. And so that area of sort of professionalism, I think, and definitely a lot of principles of leadership and how leaders need to think was something that really developed for me during the 8 years that we were in New Zealand that I was working on all of these projects. And so that was really, I would say, a time in my career that cemented for me the right way to work with other people. And it was very, very valuable.
Because work for hire for a creative is very difficult.
It is.
Yeah.
It is very difficult. I talk a lot about the differences between being an artist and being a technician.
Okay.
I was never an artist. I don't believe I'm an artist. I don't go home like this, like the hundreds of people I've worked with over the years. I don't go home at the end of the day and do my own short films or my own stop motion or my own photography. I have always struggled to have that drive to tell my own stories in my own creative way. But where I was strong and I did excel, it was working collaboratively with other people to execute on their vision and their stories. So I've always thought of myself as a technician, someone who can communicate effectively within teams in order to wrangle a strategy and a way of moving forward. That's the philosophy degree as well, which is that kind of rational and logical problem solving mind was something that I felt that I excelled more at rather than needing to be that artistic, creative person that's going to go and tell my own stories. And so I always sort of separated those two things for me in terms of sort of understanding where my strengths lay. And yeah, I felt like at Weta, I was really given a lot of amazing opportunities by that company to explore that area. So working with clients was something that I got really excited about and was very happy to do. Understanding how different directors think, understanding their vocabulary, understanding how to ask questions. That's something we teach at Steamroller, where I am, and developing that skill set to establish and cement a strong collaborative relationship and understand how to move it forward in order to achieve what we're trying to achieve. That was something that I started to really feel like I was developing in myself and in the people that I was working with.
Now, you mentioned Steamroller, so let's talk about that. You are currently the Chief Executive Officer of Steamroller Studios. They're located in Mount Dora, Florida, among other locations. The company is a member of Film Florida, which obviously we appreciate. Tell us a bit more about the company, its history, and why Central Florida was the ideal location for this part of Steamroller.
Absolutely. So Steamroller is a remarkable story. The company started, it took years before they really realized that they had made an animation company. That was not the original intention. The original intention was Adam Meyer, Jalil Sadul, and Keith Lackey were three guys who all had, established careers. Jalil was at DreamWorks, Keith was at Weta, Adam was already an entrepreneur developing his own business. And the idea really was to kind of take a break and make a video game.
Hmm.
If I speak from Jalil's perspective, he was at DreamWorks. He was working on the biggest animated films, and he left it because he wanted to kind of break out and do something creative. That's that artistic mindset that I was talking about before, right? Which is an artistic mindset. You can't help it. You have to do it. It's a calling to do that. And so these guys left their jobs and left their careers to just get together and make a video game. And I think at that time, the mentality was, well, we're not building an animation company. This isn't going to be our forever. This is going to be something that we're going to do because we need to get that creative energy out. And then we'll see what happens. Maybe they go back to DreamWorks and Weta and those sorts of things. And so the decision to do that video game in Florida was largely a practical one, which is when you give up your high-paying job and you've got children and a family, you've got to figure out how you're going to do that artistic vision on a shoestring. And so that's what happened, which is Adam and Keith grew up in Eustis and Mount Dora in Central Florida. And so there was an opportunity to basically live, on the cheap and kind of build this thing and make this video game as a group of buds. And so what happened ultimately was as they were making the video game, I think they at a certain point realized that they don't know how to make video games. And so this is, again, that artistic mindset, right? Which is we're just going to do it because we have to do it. And then you sort of start to figure out, what you know and what you don't know. And so what happened, they had done a Kickstarter to raise some seed money to start this thing. A lot of their friends were contributors. I was a contributor to the Kickstarter. I think if I speak from people outside of that, group that started this game, so people like myself who were in, much bigger companies and sort of pursuing their careers, we all probably thought that it was really nice what they were doing, but they'd do it and then they'd be back.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anybody envisioned that they would kind of start creating the runway that now has become a successful independent company. And so when they ran out of money from the Kickstarter, I think there was probably an existential moment there where they either could pack up and go back to their jobs, or they could really figure out how to make it work. And so what they did was really what ended up being the foundation of the entire company, which is they had a group of animators available. They had contacts, a Rolodex of people that they knew in the industry, and they started seeing if anybody needed help on their projects as a way of bringing in money so that they could then channel those funds back into the development of the game. So for years, this sort of on again, off again relationship to the game had to happen, because as they would bring in money, they would run out of it in developing the game, and then they would go back and look for service work. And so you had this very sort of stop-start kind of practical way of getting the game done that was kind of unavoidable. And so as the years went by, that kind of service side where it was like, give us your animation, we'll do a great job for you, that just started to grow through word of mouth, through reputation, through the quality of the work that they were doing. And so it took many, many years to get that video game done. But during that time, at a certain point, they had to have stopped. They did. They stopped and realized, oh my God, we've actually built a company. And so that's how Steamroller really started. It wasn't a strategic decision to go Florida. That's where we got to be, guys. It was really the practicality of making an artistic project on their own that somehow, through hard work and contacts, bloomed into this company that we have today.
And somewhere along the lines, you got dragged into it. Where'd that come from?
I did. So Jalil and Keith, Jalil even more especially because of the relationship that we've developed, but Jalil and Keith and I, we all worked at Weta together. So we all worked in the same building, and I developed a sort of fast friendship with Jalil. We sat in the two offices beside each other, and we were both Dungeons and Dragons nerds that loved gaming and board gaming. And so Jalil and I and another group of individuals, we just became really fast friends. And Jalil and my friendship continued on through all of the years that he went off to DreamWorks and I stayed at Weta and then eventually went off to DNEG in Vancouver. We were just always connected with each other. And it was a very powerful friendship, I think you would say. It was not a typical friendship. It was just we connect on so many levels. And so fast forward to today, and, it's very easy for me to say that he really is my brother. There's a very, very deep bond that he and I have. And so when I watched him, obviously go off to DreamWorks and be very successful, he's really one of those few extremely talented animators in both creature visual effects work as well as, feature animation and more cartoony stuff, which is a rare breed. We don't generally, our educational institutions don't cater to, you're not going to do both. You're going to pick one and you're going to go into that. So as he went off and started Steamroller, I just remember I have this incredible admiration for filmmakers. Okay. Any type of filmmaker, especially set-based filmmaking, coming from those production assistant days that I did not enjoy. I have this incredible admiration for anybody that makes a movie. So independent filmmakers, I almost drop to my knees and want to bow because it is such an unbelievably difficult thing to do, let alone to do it well. So when Jalil went off to make the game and gave up what he gave up, really, which was a high level at DreamWorks and an established creative position, I had this unbelievable awe and admiration and wanted nothing more than for him to succeed. That's what I wanted most, was just for him to have a great experience and to do something wonderful with it. And I continued my career in a completely different way. I worked for the big tentpole companies and was working on very big projects with thousands of people. And so I kind of went in a different direction. And at a certain point, I started feeling that entrepreneurial call that Jalil had felt so many years earlier. I always say that he had more courage than I ever had because he really did it with nothing. Whereas when I joined Steamroller, the seeds of Steamroller were already in full bloom and growth. And so it was a difficult decision for me to make because I, at the time, was the head of animation at DNEG, so had a good, strong, established position and was doing very well there. But I became disillusioned with what I was doing because I felt that I had, for lack of a better expression, a higher calling in my career path that I needed to explore. It was very much a desire. If I know this will sound terrible, but you'll understand my meaning. It was a desire for control, which is when you work in a company that, in the case of DNEG and Weta before that, these are thousands of people that are working in the company. When you start to establish a vision for what you think is the right way to work, you see so many mistakes along the way, so many issues with burnout, work-life balance, stress, depression, all of these things. You start to establish a strategy, a philosophy, a way that you think people should work and communicate and collaborate together.
Yep.
At a certain point, you start to feel that frustration when the rest of the company isn't seeing it that way. And so my connection to Steamroller began the moment I made the mental decision and told my bosses at DNEG a year earlier that I was going to leave, that there was no way I was going to stay because it wasn't allowing me to kind of move to that next level of really driving decision making. And at that moment that I decided, it's kind of like when you want to buy a new car, you suddenly start to see that car everywhere.
Yep.
So the moment I made that mental decision, Jalil and I kind of had this reconnection point where I said something to him and he got very excited because the timing was right for someone like myself to come into Steamroller. It had grown to the point where Jalil's passion, he's truly an artist. His passion is for storytelling and for, narrative development. But he had been building this company for 7 years at that point. And that was something where he really needed help and he needed someone to focus on areas of the business so that he could go focus on other areas of the business. And here I am coming along going, I need some blanks, not blank slate, because there was already wonderful things built at Steamroller, but I need an opportunity to walk through a door that will allow me to kind of cultivate some of my own ideas. And Steamroller at that time was at this perfect moment where all of those systems and legacy hadn't been established yet. There was a wonderful culture. The people at Steamroller are amazing, still are today. And so there was this great opportunity for me to kind of come in and try what I wanted to do. And Jalil and the other owners were happy for me to be able to do that because, they wanted me to be part of the company. So that sort of came with the deal, so to speak. And the bones of the company were already well established and very successful. And I just needed to kind of add this layer on top when it came to things like structuring cultural development, structuring learning and training, working to bring in new business so that the company could continue to expand in different areas that it didn't have before. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for this opportunity to not be told no when everything in my instincts and my gut was telling me this is the right way to go. I needed that environment where I could try these things and explore how to be a great studio. And that's kind of how it all started. Jalil and I sort of dated, quote unquote, for about, I don't know, 5, 6 months, Zoom every Sunday. And after a number of months, we just made a final agreement that we would come together. And I will legitimately say that this has been the most exciting, most successful for me personally, 3.5 years doing what I've been doing. And I never imagined myself being in this role. I was an animator my whole career, animation director and an animation supervisor. But I have felt that this was that next step that I needed to take in order to feel like I could really make a mark. And I couldn't be happier.
Well, you mentioned something there that leads into my next question, which was a lot of small companies want to produce original content, but they have to pay the bills. So talk about that kind of tug of war that you guys go through in terms of business development philosophy,
Yeah.
in that you need to do the work for hire service business because that's what pays the bills and gives you the money to do kind of the quote unquote fun, creative, entrepreneurial stuff. So talk about how that functions.
Yeah. So that is our almost an everyday conversation. It is an unbelievably complicated balancing act of an ecosystem that can very easily tip one way or the other, and you've got to be on top of it all the time. Now, I've never worked in a company that made its own content. The companies that I've worked in were largely service businesses. Now, there's a fundamental problem in the animation industry, I believe, with being a company that is a fundamental service business. Because when you are, you have no control when the industry shifts. And this past year has been an unbelievably crystallized example of how companies were thrown, around or tossed around on the waves of this shifting industry because of the strikes that happened and the fallout and impact on, the vendors or the service businesses that were, feeding visual effects and animation. So for us at Steamroller, we have two things kind of going for us. Number one, we have an unbelievably artistic and talented and creative team that works in the company that wants to tell its own stories. So right away, the original DNA of the studio in making that game that we were talking about, that original DNA is to do our own thing. It's part of the company. And as the years went by and we would make service money, we didn't take that money and go sit on a beach drinking margaritas as owners. It was always, okay, well, what new story can we do? What can we tell? So when you have that side of it, plus you have the side of it of wanting to control your destiny as best as possible, the service work starts to shift in terms of it doesn't be the be all end all anymore. It starts to become more of a means to an end. And for us, the way we see the business is we need to be firing on all cylinders on both sides of the company, which is the service side of the company, as well as the idea creation and narrative creation side of the company, because it will give us strength in the future to ride those waves of industry change much more easily. Because if we can create our own content that has great success with the public and that people want to see, then that allows us to bring money into the business to drive that content. And we can kind of be stronger by laying a foundation on both sides. Whereas when you only have that service side, anything happens, you're in trouble. Now, a lot of companies will specialize in a particular type of work, visual effects work and live action, or video games or feature animation. The other great strength of Steamroller is as we grew, we started developing clients in all of those areas. And so from the service side, we are fortunate enough to work in in-game animation, visual effects, feature animation, and game cinematics all at the same time. At any one time. Right now, we have all of those types of projects in the company.
Wow.
So when the strikes hit, we had clients that stepped away from their relationship with us because obviously they were affected by the strikes. So it just kind of cascaded down. But because we had clients in so many different styles and formats of animation, we were able to shift our staff into those other areas. So we were fortunate enough to continue to grow during tough years or tough year and a half, this past tough year and a half, where other companies were negatively impacted because they were very sort of they had their particular specialty within the film industry that when the strikes happened, they couldn't pivot. It was much more difficult for them. So we want to not only be a company that can pivot on the service side, but we also want to be a company that is recognized and can have successful intellectual properties that will also bring money into the studio. Now, the difficulty of that balance is, as long as you are in a stage where those intellectual properties are not bringing in money, then you have to be very careful about how you are using money in the company to feed that side of the business. If you
Right.
slow it down, then you have another set of problems, because slowing it down means you're continuing to invest on a single thing that you're doing. So you don't want to drag a project out for years and years and years, because the investment stays the same, but you're also sort of that one trick pony where all of your eggs are in that one basket. But we know, in order to be recognized as an intellectual property company, as a company that can make its own stories, we have to have a diversity of those stories. We don't know what's going to be successful. Is it going to be Spice Frontier, our science fiction animated series, or will it be Master, the movie that we want to make, or will it be a short film that gets nominated for an award? All of those projects take years to develop. They take a huge amount of money to invest into. So the slower we are in developing a single project, the more difficult it is for us to have that diversity or that library of work where we increase our chances for something to be successful. So we have to be careful to not also go too fast, because if we go too fast, we may overinvest, or we may tip the balance of, kind of our overhead resources. In other words, the people that are working in the company that we pay for out of pocket versus the people that we pay for that are being covered by service work that we do with our clients. And then you have also all sorts of other things, which you've got investment towards infrastructure, towards software, towards licenses, towards, all human resources is a huge investment for us. So, it's a very, very delicate balance. But what we try to explain to all of our staff that work at Steamroller is, we won't compromise on the decision to try and get these narrative stories off the ground at Steamroller, because for us, we're not just doing it for fun. It's not just because we love to tell our own stories. It is a clear strategy for the business. It's a direction we feel we have to go in, that we always questioned why other companies we worked in didn't do it. And we know why they didn't do it, because there's a huge amount of investment there. And when you have investors putting money into the company from outside the studio, they want a return on investment. And that investment into developing those properties is really long term and doesn't show the fruits of its labor very quickly. So it's a very nerve-wracking thing to put money into that when you don't know what the outcome is going to be. For us at Steamroller, we don't have any outside investors. We are a bunch of artists and animators that are kind of directing our future. And so for us, we are committed wholeheartedly to moving in that direction until, really, for whatever reason, we can't anymore. And hopefully the end result will be something's going to land on that side. People will fall in love with Master, and it'll become a wonderful property that we continue to tell stories within that world. Or maybe it's another IP. We have like 8 or 9 different narratives that we're currently trying to develop. So it's a very tricky ecosystem, a delicate balance, and one that we absolutely believe in and won't stop trying to fulfill.
Yeah. And now, from previous conversations you and I have had, and you actually alluded to it earlier, you have a huge passion for leadership in company culture. Talk about why that's so important to you and how that is part of the everyday at Steamroller.
It's a really good question, and it's a huge question. Ultimately, the origins of anything that we try to do at Steamroller that caters to the principles of, sort of strong relationship building comes from the fact that we all worked on the ground as animators. I can't even tell you, like, sometimes I think to myself, like, how did I get through this industry? I have done so many years of overtime, of insane hours, difficult projects, complicated clients. It goes on and on. And when you work on the ground every day with a team of people, you start to wonder why nobody is protecting you. Where are the relationships with the company that guarantee and ensure that you are going to be listened to, that you're going to be taken care of? That there's an empathy that comes with your difficult day-to-day experience. And I never had that. What I had was great friends,
Hmm.
great relationships that you build, but I never felt really taken care of. And when I came to Steamroller, it was very important for me to try and build systems within the company that would cater to the individual experience, which is an incredibly difficult concept for any business. When a company grows, they add more people to the mix. It is only natural that the rungs of the hierarchy get deeper and deeper. That's what
Hmm.
happens when a company grows. You can only stay flat for so long before suddenly you have managers and middle managers and people who have smaller subsets of people that they're responsible for. There's a fundamental problem when that happens. It is the kiss of death for me, for a company, at a certain point when they grow so large that if they haven't thought about how to deal with that, then they risk the problem of missing communication, not miscommunication, missing communication between the people who are making fundamental decisions at the higher level of upper management and the people who are actually doing the work, right? They're
Hmm.
the most
Yeah.
important people. They're the ones that are doing all the work. So how do you ensure that there is a stream of consciousness happening between the higher areas of upper management and the people doing the work when you keep adding more people in the middle who are responsible for communicating those messages? And so for me, in past companies that I've worked in, I don't really know what's going on. Nobody really knows what's going on. And we sort of kind of pivot and move with the bigger decisions that we're told are being made. And then we whisper about it, right? We
Hmm.
whisper among each other, oh, that was so dumb. Why did they do that? And what I've learned now, being on this opposite side of the fence, this non-artist side of the fence, is 99% of the time, there's really reasonable, rational, and good reasons for why these decisions are made. But the communication is so poor that you create this kind of hive of energy that is bad energy because it's not being diffused in the right ways. It's not being communicated to in the right ways. So for me, when it comes to running Steamroller, I do not come from a business background. I don't have that education. I don't think in terms of bottom lines, which is probably bad for people to hear because, hey, I'm running the business. But listen, we've been successful up until now because we've got good heads on our shoulders and we make good decisions. But my point ultimately is that my intuition, my instinct towards a decision always cater to the personal experience first. That's just the way I am. I know how it was for me. I know how I want people to feel when they're working in the company. So what we've done is we've created a system that we think is special. We don't think it's perfect. We never think it's perfect. And if anything, the past 3.5 years, it has constantly evolved and changed. But at its core is the premise that every business must be able to engage in an accountable relationship to the individual in the company. The individual, not groups, not
Hmm.
teams, not projects. If you can't communicate as a business to the individual and their experience, acknowledge what they need, respond to it quickly, answer the questions that they're asking, then as you continue to grow, you've built no loyalty with that individual. I often will say to people, I think it is like a dismemberment when people leave the company. Obviously, provided they're leaving, they had a great experience, did great work, and they just have an opportunity somewhere else that that they want to take. That hurts us, right? Because if everything we do in a collaborative animation industry is about relationships, successful, healthy, non-toxic relationships, then when they leave us, they take all of that with them. All of those relationships now have to be rebuilt with the next person, let alone the training, the interviewing, the risk of finding the wrong person, but you bring them in and now the relationships are worse. Like there's all sorts of things that can happen. The cost of all of that, our primary focus is making sure that we can communicate with our staff effectively. So we have a number of different vehicles where we, like mechanisms in the company where we're doing that. And they're all surrounded by a software system that facilitates that communication, as well as an entire department of people that we have brought into the company to facilitate those relationships with our staff at the individual level. Now, when we first started testing the system, we decided on a 1 to 30 ratio. That means every time we hit 30 people in the studio, a 30-person growth in the studio, it triggers a new hire of one of our talent and culture staff who work within our quote unquote human resources umbrella. So they're part of our human resources group. We call that department talent and culture. We moved away from the human resources terminology. And essentially, their sole job is to interact with their 30 staff at the individual level. They also work within a software system that allows them to document, that allows them to make requests, that allows them to ticket the needs of people at different levels of priority. So it could be something as small as I want, a different type of cookie in the kitchen to I am thinking of leaving because I want more money or I want a promotion or I want to move projects or I'm unhappy with this person or that person. It is a massive system that we've built that is almost like matrix code running through the company on a daily basis. Essentially, what we did was we opted to listen to everything instead of deciding what we want to listen to and respond to as a business. The problem with doing that is the communication, right? There's so much of it when you choose to listen to everything that you are now accountable for responding to all of it. And
Yeah.
some of it will go nowhere. Some of it will be a tiny thing, or maybe it was a miscommunicated thing and it's not really a thing. And others are major things. They're really important things to those individual staff members. So, in order to preserve our philosophy that we must be accountable to that relationship as a business, we have to respond to all of those things. So we're in a constant state with this team and with the software of responding to the individual needs, requests, questions, communications of our staff. So it's a human resources department that continues to grow. It doesn't,
Yeah.
unlike most companies, it stays the same size or in some cases even shrinks. So you could be 5,000 people and have like 6 people in HR. We currently at almost 300 have 10. And that was a commitment we made from a financial standpoint as a business to say, we have to do this. This is paramount to the success of the company in order to build loyalty and trust with our staff, that they feel listened to and they feel like we are invested in their growth and development. And then, of course, that team isn't just talking to all of those people. They're also building all of our training and infrastructure. We've enrolled them in online university. So since the last 3.5 years, they've built 30 plus official workshops on anything from empathy to vulnerability to time management, conflict management, personality types. It goes on and on. So they really are what we call the nerve system or the nervous system of the company. Because if I need to know as the CEO how people are feeling about something or what the vibe on a project is, they know because they are literally working in those shows with those people every day, all the time. So we've essentially embedded HR into the day-to-day workings of our staff, as opposed to this department that sits on the sideline and you only go and see them when you got a problem with your visa or your benefits.
And now you mentioned 300 employees. I don't think they're all in Central Florida, right?
No, so we're very diverse in that respect. So at the end of last year, we officially expanded to Vancouver. I have to be careful my words when I say expanded. We do not have a studio yet in Vancouver, a physical brick and mortar facility. So right now, my house is like the registered address for the company. But we are officially expanded into Vancouver, meaning we can take work in Vancouver that applies for provincial rebates and federal rebates and that sort of thing. And so we have a large number of staff in Vancouver. It's especially grown this year because we're doing a animated feature film with 20th Century Fox. And then, of course, there's our central office in Florida. This is the origins and start of the company. And we have a beautiful building in Mount Dora, where I just returned after our 10-year anniversary party, which was absolutely wonderful. And then, of course, we also have a studio in Mauritius, which is a country near Madagascar. It's a small island. And I get asked all the time, why do you have a studio in Mauritius? One of our founders and one of the owners, that's his home country. So as years went by, he would do training and teaching of animation to young people in Mauritius that were interested in learning. There isn't much of a culture of animation in Mauritius. And slowly over time, those people became members of the company, and it just slowly grew over time. And now we have about 20 people in a building there. And then, of course, we have international contractors, and we've got people in 36 different countries around the world. And they all specialize in different areas of animation. So of our 300, almost 150 are just animation. Now, we do service work in all sorts of other areas, storyboarding, character and concept design, rigging. But animation really has developed as the main service offering in the business. And so we kind of, the same way I was saying, we have animation services in games and different types of film work. So too, we have an animation team that has skill sets in all of those areas, whether it be creature animation or facial, motion capture. It could be, cartoony performance stuff, anime styles of animation. And so our animators have been very carefully brought into the company and cast to these different strengths. And then, of course, because of the diversity of project work, they get to move around. So you could be at Steamroller. I've got people who have been here for just 2 years. And in that 2 years, they touched a full keyframe performance project, then went on to Avatar to, animate Navis and Banshees, and then went into a video game project to do some cinematics. So that's one of the real advantages, I think, working with us is you don't get kind of pigeonholed into one thing. You can have quite a diverse offering of different projects.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned in one of these questions, Spice Frontier.
Yes.
Tell us what it is, because I know a little bit about it, but certainly you know better, and it looks really cool.
Yeah, Spice Frontier is an amazing project that is created by Jalil. It's a real passion project for him that he's been developing for many, many years. When we were doing the world building for Spice Frontier, we were working with our writer, Chris Porter, and Jalil was working with him to kind of do all the world building. And as that sort of developed, we realized, well, we actually have a book. So we actually wrote a full novel about Spice Frontier. And eventually that kind of led into our short film that we made in 2019. And that was an 8-minute short film that was very successful. It ran the independent film circuit and won a lot of awards. And it resulted in bringing in a lot of great service work for the studio. And we loved that project so much that as we got to our 7th year, we decided it was time to finally sort of build our own pipeline so that we could tell our own stories. So for the past few years, we've been making Spice Frontier the pilot episode for what we hope, for everybody listening out there, for what we hope will be an animated TV series. So mapped it out as a 10-episode season 1. We have invested not only into the building of a Unreal-centric real-time pipeline for telling that pilot episode, but then, of course, we've brought in wonderful technicians and programmers and artists to execute on creating the episode. The concept behind the show is absolutely brilliant. It's essentially a science fiction young adult adventure about a team of aliens led by a human named Kentucky Williams, who is one of the last remaining humans in the universe because Earth has essentially been destroyed for over 250 years. And Kent has been raised by a different species of alien called the Picardians, and he comes across a cookbook. And he discovers a deep love of the idea of reinventing human cuisine in the known universe. And so him and his compatriots essentially visit planet after planet in search of the lost ancestral ingredients of the human race so that he can bring back human cuisine and bring people together, of all different aliens and races and build restaurants. And he's got this grand vision, you know, bringing back and rediscovering human food. So it's a wonderful sort of adventure with a lot of different characters and relationships between those characters. It's actiony, but also fun. It's also charming and endearing, and it touches on various issues that we deal with in the world today. And it's a wonderful project that we're very, very passionate about.
Yeah, it looks really great. I've seen some stuff, and I'm looking forward to monitoring the progress as it goes. Now, regardless of whoever is in our industry in different sectors, everyone wants to know what's next. What's next? Talk about your strategy for running an independent animation studio and your long-term goals for staying relevant and self-sufficient in an always changing industry climate.
So one of the most important things that we're doing right now is making sure that our company is technologically secure enough that we can bring in any type of client work. So obviously, all of our different clients across film and games have different requirements when it comes to their securities and system requirements in order for us to have data within our pipeline and network that is secure. 2025, we're hoping will be the sort of last stepping stone for us to achieve that highest level of industry security so that we can start to really bring in full feature film work within the company and do that entirely independently inside of the studio in all departments at all levels. So that will be something that we're hoping to achieve. This work that we're doing right now with 20th Century Fox on a feature film is very important to us because it's probably the largest volume of animation work that we've done for any one project before. So this has been an incredible experience for us to really show that in terms of our infrastructure and our operational health, we can manage that level of work. And that coupled with the sort of volume of work that we've achieved with Spice Frontier across all departments within our pipeline is really moving us to that next stage of much larger project work for the entire studio. So that's a huge goal for us, is to start looking past just really animation services in terms of the work we do with our clients and starting to have our clients see us as a full one-stop shop in terms of our pipeline capability, but also in terms of our security and network infrastructure, and then also finally in terms of our capabilities within all of those different departments. So that's a huge thing for us. The other thing for us is, as I've mentioned before, we really want to get the IP off the ground. So Spice Frontier is something we're working very hard on trying to get as many eyeballs online around this project as possible in the form of viewership, subscribership, really paving the way for an online release, because that's what we're looking to do. The reason we're looking to do an online release is because we don't want to leave our destiny in the hands of purchasers, where if they come along, that'll be great. We'll be very happy to chat with them. We are actively looking for distributors to help us tell the remaining 9 episodes of the story. But we don't want to sit around waiting for that to happen. We need to, in parallel, craft a vision for our own future that can work for us. And so we're creating a very strong strategy around releasing Spice Frontier on YouTube, on our social media, and on our YouTube channel. And so our marketing team has been working hard on really trying to create a strong social media foundation for us so that when that episode does release, it's going to release with a bang. The hope is that we'll get a lot of metrics, a lot of really positive feedback about the project. And then, of course, because there's not going to be much in the way of, money through that type of release, we're hoping that potentially that could turn into a distributorship deal or some form of investment deal that will allow us to tell the next 9 episodes. So we're kind of trying to carve 2 paths for us at the same time. One we can really control, and the other that hopefully someone will be really excited about the work we're doing and want to get involved with us on it. The other thing that we're trying to do is to get other stories that we're trying to tell off the ground. We really feel like if Spice Frontier is not the one, then it'll be something else. And so it's important for us to tell many different stories at different stages of development so that we can bring those to people who make big decisions in the industry and get them excited about what we're doing. So we're heavily starting to focus on Master. So Master is based on a Jamal Bradley story that we're working with him now on to complete the development of the full feature-length script. And so we did a teaser for this idea back in 2020 that was super successful. People may have seen that. It's a Black girl that's doing martial arts in a dojo, and she sort of starts to emanate this power. And it's a brilliant story that we're very, very excited about. That is a feature film that we are heavily interested in figuring out how to do. And once again, as you can tell by everything I've been describing so far, we're a company that very much wants to kind of carve a path for ourselves. And if people aren't going to help us do that, then we're going to do it. We're going to figure out how to do it. So we're exploring right now, well, how do we make this movie? How could we do that? Is there a future where we could actually potentially do that? We don't know yet. Obviously, this comes with enormous costs and complexities. But right now, we're trying to get the script done. And then our hope is to take a 1-minute portion of that script and tell that story within our new pipeline that we built for Spice Frontier. So the idea is that the pipeline serves as the foundation for all of our visual aesthetics, for all the stories that we're trying to develop. Hopefully our clients love that visual aesthetic and they want to do their stories in that pipeline as well. But the goal will be to do something different from that teaser, which was all out of the box kind of Maya tools, and actually this time do a 1-minute visual representation of what Master will look like inside of our new pipeline. And we think that, coupled with the script, coupled with all of our concept art and the art Bible that we've created, will get people really excited about helping us make this project. So that's sort of the next step.
Good. Good. And now you're also a member of the visual effects branch of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. What has that experience been like to be part of that community?
That is a highlight experience for me. Now, I'll just say I'm still new. I only got in to the Academy about 3 years ago, and it is this incredible organization that is unbelievably professional. I'm constantly being communicated with on email and through the app that we have about all of the goings on within the film industry. The resources that are made available to members are absolutely incredible. And that's something that we've been taking advantage of, as well as just being able to watch and participate in the voting of all of the different films that come out throughout the year. And also something that I'm interested in, I don't know when I'll do this, but there's always opportunities for leadership within the academy. It's an electoral system. And so that's something I'm excited about. I always see the emails come by for when elections are starting. I'm like, oh, I'm too busy. I can't get involved. But that is very, very much something that I want to do. But it's a really amazing organization, and there's no lack of incredible sort of video commentary on filmmaking, behind the scenes, interviews, there's live events. It's something that I couldn't be happier to be part of.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Advice, I'm sure there are people listening to all of this that are wanting to get further into visual effects, animation, all that part of the industry. What's your advice? Are there programs? Are there books? What would you tell somebody that's trying to kind of follow in your path?
So, first off, I would say the education environment that you put yourself in is probably going to be the most important thing. I have interacted with schools and programs that I think are not conducive, let's say, to finding work in the industry, in the sense that I don't think that the curriculums or the programs are representative of the realities of what industry professionals are looking for in new talent. And so I think finding the right program is extremely important. I could go into details about that and what curriculums work and what I don't think works, but that's probably a bigger conversation. So I would say It's really important to find the right program. These programs tend to be expensive, and so you really want to make sure that you're spending your money on the right thing and getting the right education. I would say that catering the type of work that you're doing at the student or junior level to where you want to be in the industry is extremely important. This is a fairly typical bit of advice that we've probably heard for many, many years now. But, if you want to go to Pixar or you want to come to Weta or Steamroller or wherever it may be, you should know what those companies do. And your work should be tailored towards that kind of work so that they can get excited about how you would fit in with their environment and the type of work that they're doing. So it's important to, in that regard, specialize. Animation is very difficult. It takes a lot of time to get really good at. And so if you're trying to do a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that, and a bit of that, that isn't necessarily going to be representative of what those companies that you're looking to work for are looking for. So when it comes to, animation performances, to me, everything is about authenticity. And authenticity is built into the universe that you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So you need to study the world. You need to study how people move, how creatures interact with things, how they act. You need to study things like anatomy, physicality, muscle. These are really important things to know so that you can demonstrate an understanding of those things. For us at Steamroller, we actually have a testing infrastructure for young talent where we require them to demonstrate a real understanding of bipedal body physics in order to show us that they understand how weight moves, how it shifts, how the anatomy of a human body works. And so that is really important to us because we do so much work where that is an essential requirement. If someone can't demonstrate that, then it's very difficult for us to hire them in. So I would say the community is also very important. Make sure that you're interacting with people who potentially can give you advice and guidance on your own animation. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going into visual effects and animation, and I certainly learned a lot.
There you go.
Some good advice. So last but not least, where can people find more about you, about Steamroller, about Spice Frontier? Tell us where to learn more.
Absolutely. So for everybody listening, please go visit our YouTube channel, Steamroller Animation. It's a phenomenal channel with a lot of great content on it. We have done numerous production diaries and making ofs for Spice Frontier, showing you all of the cool things that we're doing as a company in developing that project. We have a new sizzle reel that is out there. We're about to start releasing tons of character bio videos. So a complete exploration into Kent and his background. Sela, the cyborg, that's his companion, her background. We'll be doing videos on the voice actors that are voicing talent behind these characters. So our YouTube channel is growing quite rapidly. And that is also the space where we will release the episode. So we would love it if people would hit the subscribe button and become a part of this journey that we're on to try and get as many people excited about Spice Frontier as possible. We also have a fantastic website. The website shows all sorts of things. We've published blog publications from our staff, so you can read all sorts of articles from our staff about things that they're passionate about. We have all sorts of artwork that we've put up there from our staff, explorations of different projects we've worked on, and of course, more about projects like Master and Spice Frontier. But yeah, the YouTube channel is probably the best place for people to start if they want to learn more about the different creative work that we're doing at Steamroller.
And now I've seen a number of posts on social media where you guys are interested in hiring people. How often do you hire, and what are some of the roles that people, that you are looking for on a regular basis?
Sure, yeah. So probably the most sort of common role that we hire for is animation. Right now, I would say we are not hiring. So as we go into the fourth quarter of this year, we're probably going to stay kind of where we are at right now in terms of tempo of work. But animation is by far the most common role that we hire for. We are currently looking for legal counsel So we want to actually, in the past, we've sort of outsourced legal work. We want to actually bring someone in that can be part of the studio and help us expedite various things quicker. We're looking for programmers, so people who can help us develop the coding around our pipeline and tools and infrastructure in terms of how our pipeline operates. That's very, very important to us. And yeah, right now that's probably about it. In terms of concept artists, character designers, storyboard artists, we already have a really strong team in those areas, so we're not bringing in anybody else for that. Rigging as well. So yeah, I'd probably say that's about it in terms of our current climate.
Well, great. So, Aaron, this has been amazing. I really have enjoyed the conversation and getting in the weeds on some of those other stuff that we don't typically talk about too much in our industry. And obviously, I'm a big fan of Steamroller Studios. So, thanks for sharing all of your insights and philosophies. And thanks so much for being on the Film Florida podcast.
John, listen, I was so excited when you told me that you wanted me to come on and talk about things that I'm really passionate about. So thank you so much for inviting me. I really, really appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're trying to do, which is just a really, really exciting journey that we're all on. So, fingers crossed, we're going to be very successful. And so, yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org and like or follow our social media pages. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. Please also consider going to our website and donating $20.24 for our 2024 fundraising campaign. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at filmflorida.creator-spring.com. And please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.